In the vastness of life, we often find ourselves at crossroads. Questions emerge. What is the true measure of happiness? Is it what we have lost, what we cannot gain, or what we hold in our grasp now? Today we journey through a tale of reflection and revelation, exploring the profound truths hidden in the fabric of existence. In the stillness of dawn, as golden light seeped through the cracks of the world, a humble temple stood atop a hill. The Kwan Am Temple, known far and wide for its serenity, was surrounded by fragrant blossoms and age-old trees whose roots delved deep into the earth, as if anchoring wisdom itself. Within the temple grounds, devotees knelt in reverence, their whispers of prayer rising with the incense smoke, curling and disappearing into the heavens. Above the temple's main hall, on a forgotten beam, a lone spider spun its web. Its delicate strands shimmered with dew, reflecting the light of countless candles below. For centuries, the spider had watched the world in silence. It observed pilgrims weeping in repentance, seekers offering their gratitude, and wanderers searching for solace. Yet the spider itself neither wept, rejoiced, nor searched. It simply existed, weaving its intricate web as if compelled by an eternal purpose. One quiet morning, as the temple bells echoed through the valley, the spider sensed a presence unlike any it had encountered before. It was calm yet profound, like the stillness before a great storm. Buddha himself had come to the temple, his form radiating a gentle light that seemed to embrace all who beheld him. Pilgrims paused mid-prayer, their gazes drawn to his tranquil figure, but it was not the devotees Buddha sought. He gazed upward, his eyes falling upon the spider perched in its web. The small creature paused, sensing the weight of his gaze, and for the first time in centuries, its ceaseless spinning stopped. "Little one," Buddha spoke, his voice a soft yet commanding melody. "You have lived here, observing the world below for 1,000 years. Tell me, what do you believe is the most precious thing in the world?" The spider trembled, for it had never been addressed before. Its world had been a silent one of spinning and watching, untouched by questions or choices. After a moment of contemplation, it answered in a voice no larger than a whisper, "The most precious thing is what we cannot have and what we have lost." Buddha's serene expression did not change, but his eyes reflected a glimmer of compassion. "That is your answer for now. Reflect upon it, and I will return." And with that, Buddha departed, leaving the temple bathed in a quiet reverence. The spider resumed its spinning, but now it was burdened with a thought that lingered like a faint breeze. Was its answer true? What did it truly understand about the world it had silently observed for so long? 1,000 years passed, and the world below the Kwan Am Temple transformed in ways both subtle and grand. The seasons cycled relentlessly. Spring's blossoms gave way to summer's warmth. Autumn's gold fell into winter's quiet frost. Yet, above it all, the spider continued its ceaseless spinning, its web growing more intricate with each passing century. From its perch on the ancient beam, the spider observed countless lives unfold. It watched the young arrive with eyes full of hope, seeking blessings for dreams yet to bloom. It saw the old return with shoulders bowed by the weight of time, their prayers laced with gratitude for a life well lived. Each visitor brought their stories, their joys, their sorrows, and yet the spider remained a silent witness, untouched by the fleetingness of their lives. Though the world below was ever-changing, the spider's web remained unbroken, a delicate yet enduring tapestry of its labor. And yet, through its spinning, the question Buddha had asked lingered like a faint echo in the spider's mind. What is the most precious thing in the world? The spider's thoughts often returned to its answer: what we cannot have and what we have lost. It seemed so certain then, a truth shaped by the endless passing of pilgrims who longed for what eluded them or grieved for what had slipped away. Yet the more it pondered, the less sure it became. Was there not more to the world than longing and loss? One crisp autumn morning, as the first light pierced through the temple's wooden lattice, Buddha returned. His figure seemed unchanged by the passage of time, yet his presence carried the weight of eternity. The spider froze in its spinning as Buddha looked up, his gaze gentle yet piercing. "Little one," he began, his voice as steady as the temple bell's toll, "1,000 years have passed. Tell me, have you found a deeper truth? What is most precious in the world?" The spider hesitated, its many legs gripping the silken threads of its web. Finally, it replied, "The most precious thing remains the same, what we cannot have and what we have lost." Buddha nodded, his expression unreadable. "So be it," he said, "but time is a patient teacher, and understanding often comes not from thought, but from experience. I shall return again when the time is right." With that, Buddha departed, leaving the spider to its web and its thoughts once more. Yet his words lingered, weaving themselves into the spider's reflections. What could experience teach a being that simply spun and watched? The question grew heavier with each passing day, like dewdrops gathering on a silken thread, waiting for the moment they would fall. Another 1,000 years passed, and the spider's web, though repaired countless times, still clung to the beam of the Kwanam temple. The world below it had shifted in ways unimaginable. A once small village had grown into a bustling town, the forested hills surrounding the temple now dotted with paths trodden by merchants and travelers. Yet, amid the ceaseless flow of time, the spider remained the same, spinning its web and observing the world in silence. On a misty morning, as the temple bells echoed softly across the valley, the spider awoke to an unexpected sight. A single dewdrop, perfectly formed, hung from the center of its web. It refracted the dim morning light into a spectrum of colors, casting tiny rainbows across the wooden beam. The dewdrop seemed to glisten with life itself, and for the first time in its endless existence, the spider felt something more than routine, a profound sense of joy. Day after day, the spider marveled at its small treasure. Each time the dewdrop caught the light, it shimmered with a beauty that seemed to defy the passage of time. It became the spider's sole focus, its silent companion in the solitude of its web. But one fateful morning, a strong gust of wind swept through the temple. The fragile dewdrop quivered on its silken thread before being carried away into the vastness of the air. The spider watched helplessly as its cherished possession vanished, leaving behind only an empty strand of silk. A profound emptiness filled the spider. The web, once its pride and purpose, now felt meaningless. The joy it had briefly known was replaced by an aching void, a longing it had never before experienced. The spider, for the first time, felt the weight of loss. As the spider sat motionless in its web, Buddha appeared once more. His radiant presence illuminated the shadows of the temple, but the spider barely noticed, its thoughts consumed by its loss. Buddha's voice broke the silence. "Little one, I have returned. Tell me now, after another 1,000 years, what is most precious in the world?" The spider, its voice heavy with sorrow, replied, "The most precious thing in the world is still what we cannot have and what we have lost. I have seen it, and now I know its truth." Buddha listened patiently, his gaze steady. Then, with a tone both kind and resolute, he said, "You have experienced much, but your understanding remains incomplete. Come, little one. It is time for you to enter the realm of humans. Perhaps there you will discover the answer you seek." Before the spider could respond, a soft light enveloped it, and its web dissolved into the air. When the light faded, the temple stood as it always had, but the spider was no longer there. It had begun a new journey, unaware of the profound revelations that awaited it in the world of men. In a quiet corner of a grand manor, a young girl named Chao Ni stood by a window, her gaze fixed on the sprawling gardens below. She was the picture of grace. Her long dark hair cascaded like silk, and her delicate features seemed touched by an otherworldly serenity. But within her chest beat a heart that often felt restless, as though yearning for something she couldn't quite name. Chao Ni was the cherished daughter of a noble family, her every need tended to by loyal servants. Yet, despite the comforts of her life, she often felt a sense of incompleteness, a faint ache she couldn't explain. She spent hours in the gardens, marveling at the beauty of the flowers and the way dew glistened on their petals in the early morning sun. That dew reminded her of something precious she could not remember, but felt she had once lost. One day, news arrived that the emperor had invited all the noble families to a grand banquet in celebration of the newly appointed top scholar, Cam Lok. Chao Ni's heart stirred at the mention of his name. Though she had never met Cam Lok, something about it felt familiar, as though it echoed in the hidden corners of her mind. She decided that she must meet him, convinced that he held the key to the emptiness she had carried for so long. On the night of the banquet, Chao Ni was a vision of elegance. Draped in flowing silks, she entered the imperial garden where the festivities were in full bloom. Laughter and music filled the air, and lanterns cast warm light over the noble guests. Yet her eyes sought only one figure. When she saw Cam Lok, her breath caught. He stood beneath a willow tree, reciting poetry to an enraptured audience. His voice was steady, his words eloquent, and his presence commanded attention without effort. As their eyes met for the first time, a wave of recognition swept over Chao Ni. It was as though she had found the missing piece of her soul. Gathering her courage, she approached him. "Master Cam Lok," she said softly, "I feel as though we've met before, though I cannot explain why." Cam Lok turned to her, his gaze polite but distant. "I am honored by your words, but I do not believe we have met." Desperate to bridge the chasm between them, Chao Ni pressed on. "Do you recall the story of the spider who guarded its web in the Kwanam temple? A spider who once cherished a single dewdrop?" For a fleeting moment, something flickered in Cam Lok's eyes. A trace of recognition, perhaps. But just as quickly, it was gone. He smiled politely. "You have a vivid imagination, my lady. It is a charming tale, but I am afraid it is nothing more than that. A tale." Chao Ni's heart sank. She could feel the distance between them like a chasm that no words could cross. As Cam Lok excused himself to rejoin the gathering, she watched him walk away, the ache in her heart growing deeper. Though surrounded by the grandeur of the banquet and the admiration of others, Chao Ni felt utterly alone. She realized then that what she had longed for all her life, the connection she thought she had found, was slipping away like a dewdrop carried off by the wind. Returning home that night, she sat by her window, staring at the stars that glittered like fragments of her broken hope. She whispered to herself, "Why does the heart remember what the mind forgets? And why, when I have found him, does it still feel like he is 1,000 worlds away?" Days turned into weeks, and Chao Ni's heart grew heavier with each passing moment. Her encounter with Cam Lok lingered in her mind like an unfinished melody, beautiful yet incomplete. She tried to console herself with the comforts of her noble life, but nothing could fill the void left by his polite yet distant rejection. One quiet evening, as the moon hung low in the sky, Chao Ni found herself wandering through the garden, her steps aimless, but her thoughts full. She paused by a still pond, its surface reflecting the soft glow of the lanterns around her. Looking into the water, she saw not her face, but the image of the spider from the Kwanam temple. The web shimmered with 1,000 tiny dewdrops, but each one vanished the moment she tried to reach for it. "Why do I chase what I cannot hold?" she murmured, her voice breaking with sorrow. The next day, a messenger arrived at the manor with a royal decree. Chao Ni was to be wed, not to Cam Lok, but to the crown prince, Chi Thu. The news should have been a cause for celebration, yet her heart sank further. Though the prince was known for his kindness and noble character, he was not the one her soul longed for. The wedding preparations began in earnest, but Chao Ni could not summon the joy expected of a bride. Her heart remained tethered to the fleeting connection she had felt with Cam Lock, no matter how much she tried to let it go. On the day of her wedding, dressed in resplendent silks and adorned with jewels that sparkled like the night sky, Chao Ni stood before the altar with Chi Thu. His eyes held a warmth and sincerity that should have comforted her, but instead it only deepened her sense of guilt. As the ceremony concluded and the palace erupted in celebration, Chao Ni felt her strength faltering. That night, alone in her chamber, she collapsed onto the bed, her body frail and her spirit drained. Chi Thu, hearing of her condition, rushed to her side. Kneeling by her bedside, he grasped her hand tightly, his voice trembling with emotion. "Chao Ni, please do not leave me. From the moment I saw you, my heart was yours. If you depart from this world, I will have no reason to remain." His words pierced through the fog of her despair. For the first time, Chao Ni looked at Chi Thu, not as the crown prince, not as her husband, but as a man who had loved her quietly, steadfastly, without asking for anything in return. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Why would you love me so, when my heart has been so far away?" Chi Thu smiled, though his own eyes glistened with unshed tears. Because love is not about possession or being the center of someone's world. It is about standing by them, even when their heart is lost. It is about offering them all you have, even if they may never fully accept it. In that moment, Chao Ni's heart began to stir with a warmth she had not felt before. The emptiness that Cam Lock had left began to fill, not with longing, but with gratitude and hope. She realized that love was not just the fleeting beauty of a dewdrop, but the enduring strength of the tree that weathered every storm to stand by her side. Though weak, she reached for Chi Thu's hand and held it tightly. "You have given me something I never thought I could find, a love that is steady, unshakable, and true. For that, I owe you my heart, not just my gratitude." And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Chao Ni smiled, not for what she had lost, but for what she had found. The story of Chao Ni teaches us that life is fleeting, but its essence lies in the present. Each moment, each relationship is a treasure to be cherished. Let us remember, the true beauty of existence is not in longing for the past or chasing the unattainable, but in embracing what we already have.